The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Minimizing risks and enhancing efficiency in the midst of the coronavirus. My name is Avi Nagel, and I'm a China Market Business Advisor with the China Brand Business Council. With the lockdown is easing here in the UK, China is already on its path to recovery. Supported by strong stimulus from the government, China's economy is expected to rebound towards the second half of the year. Opportunities for business growth remain, but the unprecedented travel restrictions mean that we'll have to rethink how we do all sorts of businesses, from sourcing products to managing partners, which means it's actually the perfect time to think about how to build a more effective operation. Our speakers this morning are from the PTL Group, which has been helping companies operate in China for some 20 years. Zvi Shalgo is the founder of PTL Group, and you can see him on the video in front of you, and several other companies in China. Dor Barak is the PTL's UK lead and works with companies on their China strategy. Before I pass on to Dor and Zvi, I want to mention that you're able to ask questions using the dialog box to the right of the screen, which we'll address towards the end of the session, and potentially, feel free to interrupt. You can raise the hand to chime in if you want to. So with that, I would like to hand over to PTL.
Thank you very much, Avi, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or I should say good evening, depending on where you're listening to us from. And thank you very much for joining us today. So my name is Dor Barak, and I am PTL Group's manager here in the UK. And Zvi and I are here today to speak to you about an operational model that we refer to as shrink to grow. Now, the essence of this model is that it outlines a way for companies who are already present in the Chinese market to lower their overheads and to reduce their operational costs while maintaining efficiency and effectiveness in their China activity. Now, bearing in mind the topic of this conversation, I wanted to ask all of you who are listening today, who has operations or presence in China? If you could signal or write in the chat in any capacity, that would be great for us, just to kind of gauge what stage the listeners are on their China journey. So I've got a brief outline for you here, and I'm going to quickly introduce you to the work that our company does before passing over to Zvi, who will provide an overview of some lessons drawn from the coronavirus, as well as outlining the main points of the shrink to grow model, and of course, making time for questions and answers at the end. So who are we? PTL Group is a management firm that helps companies to enter, operate, and grow their presence in the Chinese market. We enable companies to do business in China, and we do so by providing a range of outsourced solutions and managerial services. We are a company of over 300 employees spread out over 6 locations in China, as well as 2 overseas, one being here in London / the UK, and the other being in Israel, where Zvi is currently located. We have facilitated over 300 China market entry projects in the 20 years that we have been around for. And in fact, we will be virtually celebrating, of course, our 20th anniversary next week, which should be good fun. As I've mentioned, we provide a wide range of services and solutions, and we help our clients in a broad array of areas, spanning from HR management to logistical fulfillment, and all the way over to financial management and accountancy, company registration, and even manufacturing. Here is a brief client portfolio of mine, of companies that work with us that I manage here in the UK. And as you'll be able to see, these companies are quite varied, and we as an ops partner tend to be quite agnostic in terms of who we're actually able to help. We have here some agencies, some startups, some non-profits, some tech firms, and even some retailers. And crucially to point, each one of these companies will have very specific and very bespoke needs in China. And we, as an ops partner and management firm, can cater to this individuality on a case-by-case basis. And that is us. So with that, I would like to pass over to Zvi. Zvi is our chairman and has lived in China for over 20 years, as well as scaling numerous companies out there. He's an entrepreneur and investor and was one of the founders of the Israeli Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. So Zvi, over to you. Thank you very much. Zvi?
I'm currently mute.
No, we can hear you now. Sorry about this, everyone. Give me 1 second. Zvi, we can't hear you.
Now I'm unmuted. I think it should work.
Now
Can you
it's
hear me
working,
now?
yes. Yes,
Cool.
we can hear you.
All right. Then we'll start talking straight ahead. Since just a word of caution, since we are not very aware about each attendant here, about his situation in China and his experience in China and what is interesting for him or her to listen to. We put a bunch of things that we learned recently from managing, operations of companies in China in this period. And we are trying to talk about many things and give a general impression about our ideas. If anyone has a specific topic or a specific direction that he wants to hear more, if you write it in the chat, or we'll refer to it and I can later on, we'll have the time and I can talk about it. So the first things are business lessons from coronavirus. With your permission, I will close the video just in order for you to hear me better, because I'm on a cellular connection. All right. The first thing about the coronavirus that hit us in the early January, actually in China, a bit before the rest of the world. Very, very quickly, there was a trust problem between everybody and anybody. And I think back 4 months and I'm trying to understand what was really the key point in the crisis, it was all about trust. The situation was that something that nobody knows about is starting to happen. Governments start to take over what normally is going quite fluidly in the market and start to give all kinds of instructions, which are very dramatic. And also the governments are operating in the dark, and every day they can change their minds, try to do this limitation, that limitation. Everything is very fluid and nobody really knows who to believe to. So in a well-managed society, the government is taking control and people listen to it. It still doesn't mean that the politicians and the different officers of the government really understand what to do, and every day they're changing their minds. So the main issue is that the companies are starting to be very, very afraid from the future. Employees don't really trust their managers because the managers keep changing their ideas or keep saying they don't know what will happen next. Definitely suppliers and clients are starting to be very weary. And the whole situation, when it goes month after month after month, starts to become a big trust crisis. Now, I'm saying this mainly from my angle because we are sitting in China and supporting operations of multinational companies that are far, far away. And our main function is to help them to control their team in China and to control the business environment they have in China. And we could see this trust this untrust taking over. And that's my main lesson. So later on, we'll try to deal with that and to focus on it. Then there is the issue of the ever-changing ideas by government, by business partners, by clients, even by employees. Everybody has something to say and something that he thinks is the right thing to do. And what we learned in those months is that it's definitely going to change all the time. Every view that you take after a week or two is irrelevant. There's something new to take or to think about. And it's all about how you communicate and not what exactly you're saying. Because everybody learns very quickly that nobody really knows and that things are changing constantly. And the only fixed factor is actually the way you communicate, the way you take decisions, the way you empower your employees and your clients and your suppliers and make them think with you in a very logical and very organized way. Some governments did it very well, and some governments didn't do it at all in the world. And businesses are just the same. So I can tell you a story about a greenhouse that can fly. I just wrote it so I can remember and not forget. In early January, one of our companies, which is working with us for over 10 years, they are building agricultural products in China, farms usually, and they mostly build greenhouses. And one of their projects in the inland of China, actually they finished building 6 big, nice greenhouses for a certain city. It was an initiative of the mayor of the city. It was supposed to be an exemplary agricultural park with all kinds of new agricultural, futuristic, technologies. And just as it was finished, there was a small typhoon over there. And one of the greenhouses just flew in the air, and they found it a few 100 meters on the side in one of the fields. A whole big structure, a very serious one. And immediately it became, of course, a conflict between the supplier and the client. And the client decided that they want to get compensation, and the whole negotiation got stuck because of Corona. It was running for almost a year. The company agreed to share the compensation or the building a new one, but the local government refused the company to build another greenhouse and insisted on money compensation, which was unacceptable to everybody from the supplier side. So just as we started negotiating, Corona started, nobody could fly, lawyers wouldn't leave their offices, and everything got stuck. And we were afraid that this is going to hit later on with other projects with the same government. So we had to fix it somehow. So during Corona time, actually it was delegated to us because in this case, we are a company that is actually doing all the financial support of this project. So all the contracts, all the supply contracts are coming through us, and we are co-signees on the contract with this supplier towards the government in China because they want to have a local company responsible. So in a way, we found ourselves also a part of this legal suit. And we had to approach the mayor, and we very quickly found out that there is a new mayor in the town. The reason he doesn't want to get a new greenhouse from the supplier as compensation is that he's not interested to complete the project of his predecessor, and he's actually interested to get money to build something else that this time will bear his own name. It was stupid, regular political, day-to-day China thing between officials. So at the end of the day, we approached the government of the province and we asked for some help to make this go away. And it went away very quickly because the governor of the province explained to the mayor that he has no right to do something like this. And there's a clear contract by government that he cannot change. And in short, the new greenhouse is being built as we speak these months. But it was a good example of a client from abroad that if he didn't have a co-service in China that is committing with him for the project, probably he would be able to do nothing for months. And it will be almost impossible later to fix it. It's just one small example. Another example is I think in the recent 2 months after the big crisis is almost over and factories in the West are starting to work again, we got a wave of questions from manufacturers abroad out of China, asking us whether the factories are supposed to supply to them materials are actually really working now. There was a big trust problem. People didn't believe in suppliers that we actually know for almost 10 years. And still the factories abroad didn't know if to actually send down payments and to expect goods coming, or maybe this is just a scam and the company is not really working. There's a lot of fake news and non-fake news about the issue of people opening the air conditioning in the factory so the government will see electricity costs and then give them some compensation or something. So in this case, we had to really audit a lot of suppliers in China to restart and regain the trust of the clients abroad who are ordering goods from them. So these are typical issues of trust that are happening all the time. Of course, we had issues with employees. This was very quickly happening. Some some companies wanted to let go employees just before Corona, and actually, when the Corona started, the government issued immediately a warning that no company can actually let go anybody in this business in this time. And we ended up paying full salaries for the whole period of time to 360 people. And we took it as a part of our commitment in our company. There was a possibility for every company to renegotiate with employees, and many companies did that. But this was also something that for our clients abroad, it was almost impossible to do if they are not really, if they cannot send a manager in or cannot be informed of every small new requirement of the local government, which was changing frequently all the time. So it's something that had to be done locally by somebody that is trusted by the companies and can actually find a solution with the employees. I have some examples about this, but we better move on. Do, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So before I'll go on, I want to talk about a few issues relating to doing business in China, which explain the need to keep staff there and keep people there. I'm pretty aware that if somebody already has a business running in China, this is actually not so interesting for him. But if there are people here who are not yet actually working in the Chinese market, they need to understand why it's so crucial to have people on board locally and why it's so crucial to manage them properly. The first point is about Chinese distributors. You know, many smaller companies are usually looking for a distributor, a dealer, an integrator, a representative, whatever you call it in different segments, but you need somebody local on the ground to be committed to push your products in if you're doing sales. And for many companies in other countries, smaller countries, it's very clear that you get one distributor for the whole country, maybe two in bigger countries. In China, there is a good reason why one or two or even 10 are never enough. Many companies are coming believing that starting with one will give them what they need. We can explain in many ways why it doesn't happen so. China is such a big country, and it's divided culturally to so many different groups that you really need many channels in order to attack a market. And a good example is what we call the distributor dilemma, because if you find a nice distributor that really wants to push your product in as a first, experience of entering the country, usually in the first year, you're very happy because distributors in China normally have their own captive market. It's a relationship-oriented sale, not a brand-related sale normally. And since they have a long-time relationship with several companies, they can actually sell many things to them. So the orders keep coming very quickly in the first year. Everybody's so happy. And then when the next year comes, it's very difficult to push the same product again to the same clients, normally, if it's not a perishable product. So you expect a distributor to go and find more new markets and to fight for new territories. But in China, it doesn't really happen. For a Chinese distributor, it's much easier to go to his captive market and sell many new products rather than finding new clients to the same product all the time, which is almost impossible because in other places, there are other people sitting with the relationships. So basically what happens, many of those distributors will be super effective for 1 year, and then the next year, they are almost selling nothing. And many of our clients come to us in the second and third year and start working with us when they understand that they actually need to build a network of many different channels, not only distributors. A lot of work is being done directly with key accounts, and for this, they need a team in China. To create this kind of growth dynamics, the second bullet, in this kind of passive environment where distributors are maybe very aggressive financially, but in terms of market expansion, they're very passive. It's very slow. The only way to build growth is to run all the time and find new and new distributors and channels all the time. The best way for us with most of our clients are usually having a BD or sales manager in China, a local person who is actually looking for key accounts, for key projects, and then connecting them, finding who is the best dealer to work with them, and then making this kind of triangle, talking to the dealer, making him a distributor, and closing a deal. So most of those distributions are happening ad hoc per specific projects, And later on, maybe they will transfer some more business, but nobody is actually building on it. So in average, I think we work today with almost 400 companies in this kind of sales penetration model. And you can see that in average, about 70% of the transactions are actually motivated by the salesperson of that company that is happening, that is working, not from the distribution. The distribution normally provides around 30% of the business, not more than this. So it's all about the initiative of the brand, of the company that is trying to penetrate. And a lot of the distribution is actually happening after you deal with your key accounts and not before. That's another strong reason to have very strong and very effective management for sales in China. China is basically a second home market. This concept we are talking about is actually, it's so big, it's so diverse, and the situation in the market is ever changing. Reforms, financial issues, HR issues, everything is changing all the time. You really need good managers in China for each of those disciplines. Working a team in China without HR management, without financial management, without other operational issues, it's just, it won't work well. And then you have two choices, basically. You can set up a real subsidiary with managers in each one of the disciplines, which is a major project. A lot of know-how needs to move. A lot of controls need to be built, and there's a big investment behind it. That's what a normal middle size or bigger company will do when they come to China. They will go for a plan that is in the millions of dollars over a few years, not less than this. And for SMEs and smaller companies that want to come, it's almost impossible to come committed to this kind of management style, and they will usually come with all kinds of either business development agents or distributors or all these go-betweens that can do the work. And in this case, if they don't have their own person in China to manage all of this and to find those opportunities and to push pilots and to push the validation of all the concepts from the beginning, it will be very hard for them to control the market later. They can easily lose on the branding. They can lose on many ways to the distributors who are stronger companies and more entrenched in the market from the beginning. So these are all reasons why to have your people in China working for you and not work in remote control with agents and partners. And if you enter a partnership, that's a whole different issue, but I don't know any partnership, never mind where, that you enter, and there is not a good chance that over the years it will turn sour and you'll have to get out of it. It's a normal situation in every partnership. And to get out of a partnership in China and still keep doing sales and keep doing business in China is pretty difficult if you're not well entrenched there, if you don't have your own team there, if you're not really controlling the environment, which is very difficult for those companies in the beginning. So what we normally do and normally work with companies, the smaller companies, is a step-by-step approach, helping them to build their operation like chicken and egg and proving the egg before the chicken so they can actually bring the investments in and convince people or their own board to invest money in the Chinese market. So the first stages are usually to recruit a business development guy, to control all the surrounding around him, the financials and the HR and the operations and pilots and the technology and the sales. All of this has to happen in the first year in order to prove the concept, to prove a business model and to prove the technology is working normally. We are mostly in B2B technology businesses, so it's our focus. But the main point is that after you prove that you have distribution and you have initial sales and that your technology is fine and working, or your product is working, by then you go back to your investors or your board and you ask for a serious investment and commitment to build an operation in China. And by then you also already have the reasoning why and how much it will cost and the whole plan. And usually you will get this investment because China is a significant market for almost all of us today. Next though. So generally speaking, outsourcing is a big world today in the world. Some countries that they use it all the time. Some countries are less aware of working like this. I think just as an anecdote, where we started, we built our own website about 12 years ago or more, 15 years ago. It was like a very amateurish website. But we got 40% of the clicks in that website from the US from day one. And we never ever did any campaigns or any promotion in the US. It's just so that the buzzwords of third-party operator, fourth-party operator, logistic outsourcing, and all these outsourcing, you know, combinations are very, very common in the US between the East and West Coast, and small companies in the US are very it's very normal for them to take a warehouse and do fulfillment for logistics, and everything is done in outsourcing. Nobody will open his own warehouse in the West Coast or something. So it's still today like this. Most of our clients are not American, but they easily find us. So the whole idea is to try to outsource as much as possible in order to make your operation very light, very flexible, and still very well managed. To improve the management by using outsourcing. When you are assigning the accounting or the ERP management or the warehousing, anything, if you outsource it to the right outsourcing partners, after you audit them and you work with them for a while, you will gain a much better management over things, because it's big teams, professional teams that work all year on this. They're not a person that you hire to your own office to do HR, and he's finding it very difficult to be in line with all the changes and professional enough. So he will need to have a consultant for himself or herself. And that consultant, of course, is charging you by the hour. So you end up working with a lot of consultants by the hour, from headhunting to HR normal things, to operations, to whatever, and to IT, and also other things. So it's very expensive and doesn't really make sense. What we are trying to do is to build an environment where you can get in outsourcing most of the key functions, and you will control the technology and the sales of the product, and you'll make all the key decisions, but other people will execute it in a very simple and operational way. So all this is actually taking time. You can't really work with an outsourced, let's say, warehouse that he will dispatch any kind of sales requirement that you have in China, and you will not establish your own company and your own warehouse. And still you need time to actually see that they do their work properly, actually gain trust, and actually understand that they're better than what you could have done. And that's why it's you have to understand that choosing to work in outsourcing is really a strategy and not just a tactic. It's not that, oh, I have a problem sending boxes somewhere, so I will just find a supplier of outsourcing services in this area and fix it. It normally doesn't work like this, because if you start like this, very quickly you'll find out that this is working quite well, and you'll start looking everywhere else whether they have any kind of outsourcing arrangements that you can take use of. And definitely it's a strategy. If you decide that most of your operation will be outsourced, it will allow you to shrink and to grow whenever you want, and it will let your customers actually get a better service if you do it right. And of course, there's a lot of ifs here, because there is a lot of need to manage such partners and such service providers. You need to really know what they're doing, and you need to know what you want them to do. But this is an option that is really happening for many medium-sized companies. And what happened in coronavirus was that they actually gained a big advantage because it was in outsourcing. They couldn't physically go to the country, but they had a strong management on the ground all the time, which was, of course, having the difficulties that everybody else had, but still managing and working the whole time. We never closed our operation at any time during Corona. Of course, everybody moved to work from home, but it was very normal to work from home. Everybody had their computers, everything is anyway digital, and it was quite easy. In fact, it's quite hard now to come back to work in an office every day with the traffic and all the issues of safety and so on, because everybody just functioned well out of the office. So this is one of those things that will, I think, change the mentality in many countries now, and affected us as well. There is a case of closing down during Corona. This is an interesting case. I think we have over 120 clients today active in China, only one of them during coronavirus gave us a warning that they're actually going to close shop. And most of our clients actually survived very well. It has a reason because they're not in retail. They're almost all of them in B2B sales and technology. And the truth is that after 2 or 3 months of delays, most of them will complete their targets for this year by the end of the year. I mean, industrial facilities actually will buy the spare parts and will buy the machines, and everything will move on. There's just a big delay. And of course, in some segments, the hit is very, very bad, especially those businesses that need constant, contact with people. And that's a reality. Fortunately, maybe most of our clients are not from those segments. I want to say something about the closing down and how it went, because according to the Chinese government, and this is different in every country, and I think in the West, some people don't really understand how important the employee relationship and the HR law in China is. Definitely, I don't want to get into political philosophy and communism, but of course, the origins of the whole market are a communist economy. The employees are a key. Nobody thinks that businesses can deal with employees freely any way they want. It's very, very well controlled environment. Add to this that in the last 15 years, employees raised their salary in average 15% per year. This is something that is unprecedented, never happened in history probably anywhere. So there's a lot of issues related to employees, and this is a big part of the budget of any company. What happened with this specific company, in this case, it's an Australian company. They are a company that is doing events, professional events worldwide, big ones. And they had an office with us in Beijing for several years with, I think, over 6 employees, if I'm not wrong. And as coronavirus hit China, they started to check what's happening, and they started thinking about it. Of course, they couldn't let go any of their employees already the moment it started. And by, I think, the second month, around the end of February, beginning of March, they already gave us warning that actually their business worldwide is going to collapse because everything is totally shut down for at least half a year. And they gave us a warning that they want to close the operation in China as quick as possible. And we checked everything, and of course, according to the government, we were not allowed to close just like this and send everybody home. We had to negotiate with the employees. This is in a nice Chinese way, telling you that if the Chinese don't agree to the situation, you will have problem with the government, so you better agree with them. So, of course, they are not in China, and they couldn't do these negotiations, and also their employees are a bunch of nice guys, but none of them is really senior. There wasn't a figure like a manager that you could actually relate to. They were all junior people doing sales and doing all kinds of promotion work and stuff like this. So we started to negotiate with each one of them a package to close down. We also explained to them that the company is actually bankrupt and that we have to reach a solution for their benefit, so everything is legal. And it was a nice talk, and at the end of the day, we let them go in normal, regular way, paying them a compensation salary for each year and so on and so on, and giving them some advance for the end of the month, so taking care of them a little bit. But we got the company off the hook, because if this negotiation didn't really happen, they would have to continue to pay them minimum salaries almost forever until they can solve the problem. Also, the company had a registered entity and all kinds of things that we had to take care of and to start closing as well. All right, so just a few words about operational audits, because this is one of the tools that we are using normally in order to improve the situation in companies. We started this as something very small, very fast. This is not an accounting audit or a legal audit. This is a general operational audit that, of course, checks the accounting and checks the legal, but they check it from an operational angle. So first, we normally come to a business and we offer him to do this. It should take about a week, not more than this. The results should take maybe 2 or 3 pages. And they focus on the major issues that we found and the major map to, I would say, a roadmap for change in order to fix them over time. And this is happening a lot with companies that are losing trust with their local management in China. It happened to us with some quite major companies from Europe that we actually did very long and very serious projects like this. But what we suggest today is to every small company, small operation in China that has a few people, to go through an audit like this. It's very cheap. The idea is to identify the best practices of your business in China, and if there aren't any, then write them down, sit and write them down, because Chinese employees need everything written down. Also, the courts need everything written down. Everything should be written. And after we check this, we're normally focusing on the management and the employees themselves. Who are they? Are they fitting the job that they're doing? And if not, how come they got this job at all? A lot of issues which are very managerial style issues. Of course, we get into all the governance and all to the, if there are ERP systems, for example, and accounting, we check everything. We can find a lot of anomalies there. We had many businesses that we could find a lot of trouble in the way they handle their accounting in China on a factory floor, or warehousing and stock counting, for example, many issues. Our background is more industrial, so we like those projects. Or let's say my background is industrial. Many managers in our company come from different backgrounds. But it's very clear that if you let somebody external to watch your small business and to check, he will find, or she will find, many small things that you could never think about and that your own employees would never alert you about, because it's their doing. I mean, an employee that is doing HR or stock counting, he's doing what he's supposed to do, but if he's doing something wrong and he doesn't even know about it because he's not professional and not up to date, it's very difficult to blame him or her. It's all up to the company to educate them and to be sure. And you can't educate anybody if you don't bring anybody from outside who is up to date and checking everything. So this kind of a service is actually uplifting the management and also making sure that you're not heading into trouble. I think what happened in those projects is that normally they lead to a much better behavior later of employees because they know that they are working within a frame that is acceptable and that is needed. To run a business based on our knowledge from the UK or from any other country and think everything is okay because we're actually acting okay, and it's all very general, and the resolution is not strong enough to actually go through a compliance, check or a government scrutiny. You have to be much more focused on this and professional on this today, because China is becoming much more effective in its bureaucracy. It was always effective, by the way, but today it's even more. In recent years, with the new initiatives, they are becoming more and more serious about this. I think everybody probably heard that the new company law in China is now actually putting the local companies and the wholly owned foreign companies all together in one basket, and that all companies will be regarded as the same. This is, from one side, an interesting benefit for foreign companies that will be able to attend the bids which were restricted before to locals and so on. But on the other hand, it's a way for the government to say we are now controlling the foreign invested companies just as we are doing it for the locals, and you should be much more serious about taking care of everything. So by this, I will finish talking about operational audits. I just welcome you to think about it. If any kind of business or anything can actually improve, or you need to be sure that it's okay, I suggest you to do something like this. Next door. Okay, a few principles for stable business infrastructures in China. This is true for anybody. It's definitely local independent presence from the beginning. I doubt that any kind of medium-sized company can negotiate a partnership or a joint venture in China if it has not even one employee of its own in China, professional in sales or in business, who is actually understanding the other side very well. To rely on go-between agents and bankers and lawyers and accountants and whoever is not really serious enough because they know nothing about the real business. If you are going to join a partner in China to sell, I don't know, some kind of a technical product or a hardware or a software, it doesn't matter. You need to really have somebody who is a professional in selling this on the ground to assess your potential partners, to assess your future partner and to see what really is happening and also to attend the negotiations. Somebody needs to be very, very local and very strong in knowledge. Because when you come to this kind of negotiation, and this usually happens in your own country before, not in China, with some Chinese company that really is interested to invest a lot of money in you. It's a very, very risky thing and usually doesn't end well because it's a very asymmetric relationship with a big, strong, cash-fat company in China and a small, eager, very hungry, very innovative technology supplier from UK. So it has to happen slowly with real local knowledge and not fast by all kinds of other promises like we brought you your strategic partner in China. It's very doubtful that this will be the situation later on. Cultural alignment by this is just a code word for me to say localization. I believe in local managers and people who are actually coming from the business with a lot of experience and their English level and other things are second priority. The first priority is their business capabilities in China and their existing relationships and experience. And of course, their resume, what did they really do before? Many cases, managers who are coming from abroad to China are becoming very, very expensive translators of the reality. And you don't need translation. You need real employees and real people that you rely on. And it takes a long time to rely on somebody who is different in culture and different in language and so on in the market. It takes maybe a year. Sometimes we have employees that are really not communicating well with their managers for years, but they bring the business results. And that's very important. About compliance, it's very clear today that you have to be more and more and more worrying about it. You have to really spend efforts to know that you are in good governance because the government is leaning and checking much more than before and will always improve it. So it's something that has to be done from the beginning. Ownership of C-level management in HQ, this is a very key issue that we have with many, many companies in China that are coming to us to solve problems. I think 10 out of 9 of companies of our clients are companies that already were in China, had some issues, came to consult with us, and then we did the project together for fixing. It's almost always on the background. The question is, why didn't your CFO from the UK involved in this? Why wasn't the operation manager involved in the way you're running your warehouse in China? Why wasn't, I don't know, the CTO involved in something technological that you did here? The thing is, it's very expensive to move knowledge from the UK to China in a very organized, systematic way over different disciplines. It takes a lot of manpower, a lot of hours, and especially in the beginning, you don't even have in China the right employees to get all this information. But the need to actually control and do things right is from the beginning happening. So if you let someone in China start a business for you, I don't know, a lawyer will register a company, an accountant will set up the accounting, and your salesperson will actually be the leading guy to run things, you're heading into trouble from the beginning. Because the sales guy knows nothing about real governance or real management. Usually is coming from sales background, not from general management background. And all the other people that you hire will actually do what he says if he is the key guy, if he is the manager. It's very, very difficult to control an organization like this without either external forces that are all the time controlling, like an outsourcing company, or your own officers from your own management that will start learning the reality in China and start taking control over it and taking decisions. The best way is for them to take the decisions, because even if they make mistakes, they will learn fast. There'll be a learning curve for the organization, and after a year or two, nothing in China will happen without the specific C-level management in headquarters approving it and understanding it. It will be a bit more difficult, but it will be much more responsible. By letting a small team in China, normally the BD or the sales We have many companies coming to us with a territorial Asia manager for sales. He is the person that sets up the operation in China. He decides on who will do the accounting, where the office will be, what will they do there, who will manage, and so on. And there's very little involvement by other people in the headquarters. And this is a pity, because these people don't know how to do everything. They need a lot of support to actually completing a job like this. The fact is that companies need to actually transfer so much knowledge to China, the way they practice, the way they're working, the way they're reporting inside the company, and so on and so on, the way they behave with clients. There's so much information and knowledge to transfer that you need really good people to do it with, and you need good managers to actually handle this transfer. It's a major, major issue. About building brand, of course, from the beginning, even small companies, very small companies, we have a lot of startups of 5 to 6 employees sometimes. They need to brand themselves from the beginning. They need to put themselves on WeChat from day one, record all the visits and pictures, and make some kind of presence on the social media, be on the websites, look professional and be present. This is only a beginning. In 2 or 3 years, when things will start running, people need to know you and they need to know who you are. Otherwise, every small distributor or ex-employee or just someone who heard what you're doing can easily copy, can easily claim to be able to do the same. Never mind that he actually can't do the same, but he can claim that he can. And by being much more strong on the waves, on the communication level, he can actually affect the clients in China and become much stronger than you. One of the things we have to remember is that China is a really big economy, and a small company that will take a concept, a good concept, and will develop it can become a very strong player within 2 or 3 or 4 years. And while in our countries, I think in the West, sometimes you have companies that over a whole generation are growing to $60 or $70 million. That could be a family of a generation of two. In China, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars within a few years. So it's very asymmetric. The speed is different. The ability and the maneuverability in the market is different. And they have a lot, the Chinese local businesses have a lot of advantages over a foreign business that comes from far away and is also very weak financially usually. So you need to think about it from the beginning and try to paint yourself in a very clear, original color that everybody will know that you're the original. It's very natural that there'll be a lot of copycats for every business in China, but they will sell 30–40% cheaper. And the market of your clients will never be affected because these clients don't buy the cheap products. They will buy the best. And these are normally your clients. Okay, Do, can you hear me? All right. Check the chat if there's any kind of questions or any directions, because I can see zero feedback from my end.
So thank you, Tzvi. It's always hard to sort of talk to the screen. I think that was really good. It's it's such a mix between being able to sort of build up the capability of local staff and still having the folks on board here in the UK feel like they have real understanding, real control about what's going on. There's a question from Dennis of Santander. He said, he's talking about how the situation with COVID is very fluid. In some cases, there's some political issues, which obviously the U.S. China trade disputes, and obviously Hong Kong has been in the news quite a bit recently. How do you think that's affecting nearshoring or supply chain recalibration, and how do you see that affecting potential disruptions in companies investing into China?
Well, the first thing we have, there's a lot to talk about this. We're very busy here about those questions, especially in Israel with all the American intervention, which is becoming really a burden. And the first thing I think we have to check very carefully what's happening between, I would say, American businesses and the Chinese market, just as a factor to check. And you will see that almost all of them are not in line at all with their president's policy. I mean, 80% of them in the last AmCham poll, it was published, I think, 17th of April, and it's related to before Corona time. But 80% of them say that they're not looking for alternative channels for supply. 60-70% say that this is a major market they intend to invest more money in it. So I don't think these businesses are keen to change anything. Second thing to remember is that even if people say that yes, as a rule, we should find and diversify our supply chains now, and this was like really painful for those who are relying on their, I don't know, 70, 80, 90% of the bill of materials are coming from China today. It's easy said, but it's very difficultly done. Not India, not Turkey, not Thailand, not Mexico, definitely not Brazil and not Russia. I mean, the big countries which have industrial output who can actually supply are far behind China in the investment, in the strategic investment that they put forward. In the last 30, 40 years, China is building the infrastructure for global investment, and especially in China for industrial facilities in such a way that I didn't see in any other country in the world. And those countries that have the know-how definitely didn't put the money forward like they did. And you cannot open a factory for semiconductors tomorrow morning in any other country just because the government decided it should be so. It took China also. China started the fabs for semiconductors, just as an example. It took about 10, 15 years for this industry to move into China. And it was a major target of the government to do so. And they spent many billions of dollars in doing this, in education, in facilitation partnerships, in investment, direct investment. So this is happening in China across the board in many industries that the government decided that are key for the country. This is true for blockchain and AI and robotics and so many things, automotive, all the alternative automotive, the wind power and alternative power, shipping. A lot of key issues are handled in China's very strategic industry that the government decided that will be in China. And you can hear talks about it, but I don't see the big major, investment by the US, for example, in countries that will actually be able to develop such industry. The Chinese are now well ahead in infrastructure and also in know-how. Much of their industry today are not only cheap, but actually the best in quality per price.
I've heard this, sorry to interrupt, but I've heard this question a number of times in terms of, how do we think about onshoring or how do we think about supply chains? And it's been quite interesting that the companies that are selling well in China, what we're hearing from our companies and from our service providers is that those are the companies that are actually not pulling out of China, but actually building redundancy in China. So maybe if they had one factory, they're thinking, okay, now we need to have two factories. And that way, if God forbid there's another issue in Hubei, okay, we've got something in, Hunan in a nearby province or something. And so
it will be much easier to do this than to start another factory in Malaysia or in Thailand, Indonesia.
Exactly.
I'm not saying those countries don't have interesting industry but if you want to compete in price, you have no choice but to be also in China in many industries. And just as a curious, if you remember when Trump started the war on taxes, on customs, there was a hearing in the US Congress, I think. 300 major industrialists from the US came there to say that the first ones to get hit and to lose from this war are the American industries. Because in 2 or 3 years, they are going to be blocked from China in a way, even partly, and they are going to lose their advantage in the world. They're going to be too expensive. And that's why I think the train already left the station. In terms of Chinese economy versus American economy, I believe that the Chinese are well ahead and nobody can stop them. And nobody should stop them. I don't think this war is actually to a point. There's other things that should be done that are not being done in order to delay the Chinese expansion. I totally agree that this expansion is too fast and the West is caving in without any fight. But the fight shouldn't be a fight of a war, economic war. It should be a fight of just making things on a plane that everybody can compete together, okay? If Huawei takes over the infrastructure of telecom in Europe by providing equipment for free, for years now, country after country after country. And no government is actually standing and saying, okay, you can't go into this bid if you get government money from behind. You have to come in only if you're a normal company that is paying for its loans in the bank or something similar, checking the background of the investments in those companies. Of course, it will take 40, 50 years for them to do it and not 10 years. But nobody stopped them.
So, Zvi, another question. You spoke about the importance of the brand, the company really taking ownership of managing the distribution partners and managing the commercial partners in China. So what are the aspects for companies that are easier to outsource and to downsize? And what are the aspects that you think the brands and the companies need to make sure that they have full control over?
Well, the first thing is manpower, because it's the key for everything normally. It's very easy to be focused on the business plans, and then suddenly lose an employee and the whole business is caving down because he's moving with his relationships and his knowledge. So for smaller, middle-sized companies, employees are the first priority. You have to establish trust. You have to establish the working together, and you have to give this employee. Normally, the first employee is a senior guy, and he's coming after he faced a glass ceiling in another organization. Let's say he wants to move from sales to management, and nobody lets him to do it in the bigger companies. So you give him a chance to be an all-around manager in your small brand that is only coming to China, and he's brave enough to start his own thing. And you have to build the chemistry and to support him in many ways. And then when this happens, you have to make sure that nobody external will stop your business suddenly. So you have to behave very legal, and you have to know how to do it. And if you don't know, you have to let service providers do it for you. It's very natural. And especially in such a big country with so many changes constantly, what you can outsource is much better for you to outsource. If you find good outsourcing providers, you need to look for them. We are definitely not the only ones. We are focused on management outsourcing and procedures. There are many companies who are very professional, also UK-based companies that are giving services in China for logistics, registration, whatever. It's good to lean on partners in such a big country if you are a smaller company that cannot really face a crisis. It's very easy when everything goes well, everybody's happy to be alone and to save money. But the moment there is a crisis, you're actually dangling in the air. You don't have people on the ground who really know their business, how to fix things. And then you go to providers and you ask for help, and you pay much more because you'll have to pay for a special rescue mission instead of just paying a retainer all year and letting somebody else do this work for you and making him responsible for the crisis. So for a young business in China, I believe that this is a winning strategy. You delay the moment that you take full responsibility by yourself for everything. You focus in the beginning only on sales and technology, which is basically your strength, and letting other people dealing with the regular bureaucratic things, moving money, moving goods, moving people, and so on.
So I think we've got time for one more question. I think you're hitting on a key point, which is the ability to find, train, develop that key staff in China. I know this is a problem that I hear across the spectrum from companies that just have a handful and companies that are have employment in the thousands. But how can we recruit good companies if we're SME? Good employees, good representatives if we're an SME. How do we get them to stay? How do we incentivize them in a way where they don't just come back to us and say, I'm making 15,000 kwai this month. I'm getting an offer where someone's gonna give me a great title, even though I'm maybe not be qualified, and they're gonna double my salary, even though maybe they're not gonna be qualified. Of course, they're gonna take it. So how can we find those right people? How can we keep them within the organization in a way that's actually economical?
Okay, well, this is of course a $1 million question, but I can say a few things about the nature of how it's done in China. Definitely for the last 30 years, as China was booming in such a fast way, employees could jump from one company to the other for additional £100 a month, and they would not even hesitate. And for many businesses, this was a very serious problem, retention, and everybody was trying to develop programs to fight retention. Now, you have really to distinguish here between different positions. If you are leaning on a first salesperson in China, for example, which is a major step to put the money first time on someone in China and to deliver results over a year or 2 years, you are taking to this position someone who is very, very independent and very capable, and definitely will give you a lot of headaches when he wants to, because he will be also naturally quite greedy because he's a salesperson. It's a part of the profession. And this is like training a wild horse. If you took a wild horse, you have a chance to do wild things, but you have to control him very well. If you will take somebody very lame and very quiet and very, submissive, you won't have a big business very fast, but you'll be quite safe. So I don't believe this is the way to go. I think in management, in bureaucracy, in all kinds of positions in the company, you should find people who are relaxed and really can sit down and work. But in sales, you need to be aggressive, and you need to find aggressive people to work with. And managing those people is a challenge. It's not enough to visit 6 times a year and go with them and talk to them. They are looking for something very specific in the job. Normally, it's a lot of respect and ownership of success because they need it. And the second is of course, financial success, which you don't need to give if they didn't bring you what you want. If they didn't deliver, they shouldn't get the money. But you should be very much with them the whole way. I think the key point, I can tell you that in our company, all the major positions in our company are working over 15 years in the company. We have generations of employees that came after university, and they're now in the late 30s with kids and families. There is almost zero retention in the company for 20 years. And the reason it's happening like this is because we're very, very, very keen and aware about the needs of our employees. In our case, for example, from the beginning, we noticed that most of the employees are female, and that this kind of logistics, detailed work and financial work is actually more fitting to them. And from the beginning, we decided our company will be very, very women-friendly. So we did some surveys, we did some groups inside the company, and we actually changed many of our practices to fit working women. It's from coming late in the morning because they have to take kids to school, all the way to never having overtime. Our company for 20 years, nobody had overtime. If there were extreme cases, rare cases where you had to stay overnight because some tax issue or something, then usually people got immediately the vacation the day later. And this is weird because normally in these businesses, in logistics, in finance, in services, you'll find people every month sitting at the last end of the month with the VAT declarations till midnight. And we just don't agree for it to happen. Our customers demand it, and we say, no, we work and 6 o'clock we go home. We actually let go quite a lot of business just because we insist to protect our employees and to give them a very decent environment. And in fact, after 20 years, I can tell you that most of them, all the managers in our company can easily find much higher salaries in other companies. But they know that they will have to work from morning till midnight every day, and they'll have no life. And in our company, they get a very, very stable living environment. So we found the key to our kind of employees, and I think other companies should do the same. Give a lot of attention and a lot of thought about how to make the employees really connecting with their company for long years. This is including giving them schooling. We always paid half of the price of a very high level education in English, for example, for any employee. Anyone who wants to learn English, we will pay 50%. And we did it many years. And the fact is that everybody speaks English in our company now. Very good English. And when they came to the company, most of them didn't speak well. They had the education in university, but not more than this. So I believe you need to find the right people for the job first, and only then make sure that you work with them well. Another small point is the kind of person who should manage the Chinese team from the UK, because you can find a manager who is an extremely, I would say, cold logic. We call it in Israel the German type of managers, because we all come from Europe. My grandparents come from Berlin and so on. You can be very, very bureaucratic and very, very keen on order and keen on regulations. But there's another type of managers who's much more warm and open-hearted to people, and who's hugging a lot and making sure, not hugging physically, but really, really making sure that people are happy to work together. And I think this is by far a better kind of manager for China. And you need to find a person of the people, somebody who can relate to people, because Chinese are a warm people, and they expect to be connected, even though it looks like they are a bit cold, far away, not really revealing their private life. Actually, they expect a lot of trust first, and second, a lot of warmth, because this will give you an advantage if you're like this. Not every company can actually generate this kind of feeling. And if you are keen on it, you'll find it. So, and by the way, the economy in China is slowing down tremendously. So I believe that this power position of the employees over the employers is almost history now. I believe that after Corona now, in the next 2 or 3 years, I stopped raising salaries already 2 years ago in my company. Just stopped raising them. There was a crazy rise in salaries every year for over a decade. And I just stopped it because I told them this is going to finish, everything is going to slow down, I don't agree anymore to do it. And in fact, nobody left the company. Everybody is staying, everybody is smelling the economy just like me.
Yeah,
it's much harder to find a nice company than to find a little bit more money.
I think that's I think that was very insightful. Kind of the figure out how to work with the wild horses that are going to push out the business, that are going to be rainmakers for you, and then it's about, for the rest of the staff, the majority of folks that aren't those hard driving salespeople, it's about creating the environment, having close attention to sort of what works for them culturally, personally, and then building that in such a way that works between the different cultures within the Chinese company. I think that's actually a great place to finish. I want to thank yourself and thank Dor, and thank you all for joining us this morning, this afternoon. Before we sign off, just wanted to make a note that we are hosting a week-long digital conference the week of June 15th. It's free for everyone to attend. We have a lot of different sessions that are, some are topical about specific industries and some are a little bit broader, but go to our website and check it out. And as you can see, there's the contact information for Tzvi and Dor that's online right now. And I think with that, I'm going to bring this session to a close. Thank you again for attending. Thank you again, Tzvi and Dor, and all the best in your Chinese business. Bye.
Bye.